Hey, peace and love, peace and love. This is another episode of Scholars 20 for 20. Today, I got the number one pastor in America, man. I say number one pastor in the world. We got Pastor
Hey,
Bennett.
peace
Let me
and
get
love,
up. Let me
peace
get
and
up,
love.
family. Let me get
This
up.
is another episode.
I can't even sit down when this pastor is in the building, family. I can't even sit down. He's coming with a great, fabulous topic. It's called Misplaced Hate, when you allow white supremacy to distort Black history. Before you begin, brother, first of all, peace and love to you, brother. How are you doing today?
Peace and love to the brother Garfield. Humbly so, because I'm definitely not the greatest pastor in America, but peace to brother Garfield, and peace to the chat. I'll say a little more just about my thanks to you, Garfield, once we get started. But I appreciate you even giving me the opportunity to be on. I appreciate everybody that's on the chat now listening, and those who will be on a little later listening. I appreciate it.
All right, cool. All right, why did you pick this topic?
All right, so I picked this topic one because it's Black History Month. And so when you invited me and gave me the opportunity to present, I wanted to do twofold. I wanted to present Black history, but I also wanted to present it in the vein that I'm more familiar with. And that's the aspect of our Black history that also involves faith, Christianity, and so on. And so I feel like sometimes because of what white supremacy did, a lot of it in the name of Christianity. Just if Black people have the name pastor, or Black people have your church or believe in Christianity, we get mixed in to a bowl of white supremacy, and how they misused or justified slavery and stuff with Christianity. And it distorts now our Black history, because now times when you go back and look at our ancestors, you see a lot of our Black history, it begins in the church. It begins with Christianity in America, right? And so white supremacy distorts it because our ancestors didn't believe what they were being told. And so I want to bring it out that they didn't believe what they were being told concerning Christianity and all of those things, but it is our Black history. I also want to make it clear, Garfield, that me expressing these things and bringing this out in no way, shape, form, or fashion is suggesting that therefore anyone who doesn't believe in Christianity has to because our ancestors did, or they don't believe in Jesus, now they have to because we're going to show that our ancestors did. That's not what this is to bring, but it's to give credit to our ancestors here in America and all the stuff that they had to go through and how they actually developed their own independent systems in order to give us the platforms that we have now. So just to highlight those things and to change the narrative so that even within our community, Garfield doesn't believe what I believe, but me and Garfield can build because we have a respect for what each other tries to do within our respective communities.
Pastor, what do you feel about, because March 1st, I'm launching a major program in the Black community. And the program I'm launching is going to affect a lot of people's lives. It's a social program for ex felons. We're having scholarship programs for Black folks that want to get into Assyriology and archaeology. I'm going to do a full-fledged for the month of March. I'm actually going to clean everybody's credit for free. They're TransUnion debt collectors on Garfield. So there's a lot of things we're going to do also. Work from home. We're going to show people how to get in homes the easiest way. We have our own independent banks. We got our own financial companies. So we're going to be making a lot of moves. But my headline is going to say, Black History Month don't just stop in February. And that's my problem. So commercialization has made me say Black History Month. I'm saying January 31st. I'm like, I can't wait for February 1st to see people who don't normally post about Black history post now all of a sudden. So that's my gripe. I don't have a gripe with Black History Month, what Carter G. Woodson did with History Week, because his purpose was to let you gain knowledge of your own history. I do Black history throughout the year. I don't need February, the coldest and the shortest month, to tell me when to celebrate Black history. So my gripe. So what do you feel about all of that, brother?
No, I think what you're planning to do is absolutely dope, and you're right. It doesn't have to be done in the month of February. I'll even go a little bit further to express that Carter G. Woodson's design of Black History Week, therefore becoming Black History Month, was not, as you stated, for us to only celebrate in the month of February, but it was for us to know our history so that we could repeat our history in the sense of advancement. And so anything that you're doing, so when we think of Black history, we don't only need to think the retelling of a story. We need to think the continuing telling of a story. So if Garfield plans to advance Black lives in the month of March, April, May, June, or July, that is Black history. It can't become a part of history if you don't ever do it. So we tell the stories not to only go back to that stories, but to repeat them and relive them as it pertains to the advancement. So whether it's economic advancement, educational advancement, spiritual advancement, whatever it is, if it's going to shape and advance the lives of African American people, it's all good. And so
let me ask you a personal question. Do you think the Black community, you got to show hate for white people to be successful or looked at as being Black? You got to have like an edge of hate for white folks. And the reason why I'm asking you this is because you as a Christian, you call everybody your brother or sister. Me, that's just me being courteous. I call everybody brother or sister, whether they white or Black. I only have two brothers and my only sister died. So of course it's a term of just casual endearment, if for lack of a better term. And do you think that the Black community only respects people that just show a natural hate for white people?
I think there's a segment of a community that only will respect Black people if Black people hate white people and hate anything that they feel is connected to white people. The problem with that is almost everything we touch nowadays has in some way been connected with white people, Black people, and all the way around. I also think that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this presentation. We have to get away from that narrative of trying to put Black people in a box, right? The fact of the matter is all white people aren't bad. It's just a fact. And all Black people ain't great. It's just a fact. You know what I'm saying? So we have to get away from this narrative. And that's why I call it misplaced hate, Garfield. It's misplaced hate. It's not that you have to hate the white man, but you can absolutely hate what the white man does as it pertains to enslavement, as it pertains to discrimination, as it pertains to these type of things. But then what do you do with the white people who actually were abolitionists and actually helped and condemned slavery, right? Do you throw away the science that white people use that helps to advance Black people as well because of a segment of time and people that did wrong? And I think in our community, we have to get away from that, because even if you really do a study of Black history, you see we weren't a monolith. There weren't just Christians who just believed this way and that was it. There was different movements and different times and segments where they had some disagreements amongst each other, but you can go on YouTube and see some of our greatest leaders sitting at the table discussing their views, and they don't all agree with each other, but they also didn't castigate each other because of these disagreements, right? So I think we have to be very careful about how we place our hate. I'm more apt, and this is just me, that I don't speak for the whole Black community. I'm more apt to hate the thing, not the person, right? I'm not going to put any one group in a box to hate. Right? So I hate slavery, right? But every white person didn't put us in slavery. So I'm not going to hate all white people, right? I hate Black on Black crime, but every Black person doesn't commit Black on Black crime. So I'm not going to hate all Black people because of some that do, right? And so I think we have to look at it and place our hate on the things we hate and necessarily not the people.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks like what I'm doing as far as a scholarship, and bear in mind, Pastor Bennett, I have over 18 different Black scholars that I actually reached out to. Yeah. The only people to respond, you, Chuck Morgan, Brother Unk and the Amara Squad, the Pseudo Killers, Sean from Masiwari, Warrior Clan, and that's it. That don't mean I didn't invite other groups now amongst us. Some of them declined. Shaka Amo said yes. He never responded after that. Jabari responded, and I sent him dates. He never responded after that. So when people say it's Black History Month, but maybe it's a turn of the tides, I want more scholarship. And if it comes, and you know what the hypocrisy is, Pastor Bennett?
Mhm.
All our greats relied on folks who were not from this community for information. Whether it was pseudo or not, they relied on the quote unquote what Jabari calls the Tamahu. If you go through their books that they write, who are their sources for this? All folks who are not from the quote unquote Black community. So I think it's like a hypocrisy going on. But you know what? Enough talking. We got almost 70 people watching live. It's gonna get up in there because you know your energy reaches volumes, bro. You're like the Fantastic Four, man, with the silver surfer, man. You reach worldwide with your energy, bro. So I'm tapping into the power of the ancestors right now by saying this brother right here is bringing that energy. They regurgitating in their graves right now when Pastor Bennett speaks. So, ladies and gentlemen, misplaced hate when you allow white supremacy to distort Black history by Pastor William Bennett. Get it.
All right, man, once again, I just want to, real quick, I'm going to go into this. I got like 130 slides. I promise you, I'm going to go through it quickly. Now Garfield may want to have some conversations, some questions afterwards. But let me just get a few things out of the way. Again, just respect to Brother Garfield for allowing me, right, to even be a part of his platform, number one. Me and Garfield, when we got our start, it wasn't like it is now. And we never disrespected each other, but we were oftentimes debate information or discuss information, I should say. We never won a one-on-one debate or anything like that. But we would both argue our sides or our points to different discussions. But over time, we gained a respect for each other. And so I just want to appreciate you, Brother Garfield, for always being fair to me, allowing me to yield my voice to conversations on your platform, to allowing me to be on this platform with what you're doing in this month as well. So much respect to Brother Garfield. Much respect to everybody in the chat that is watching this presentation. Let me say from the outstart, you do not have to agree with me, of course, but I would ask, as we have done with the rest of those who have been on, to respect the presentation to the point where we just allow it to be heard. Sometimes, a lot of times, I would say, because when pastors enter into this community or those of the spiritual background and faith, there's a narrative that's imposed on people, right? As opposed to allowing us to speak what things we believe, because like I said, in this community, everybody does not believe the same thing. So I'm going to give a little bit of where I stand and how I see Black history within the network of African-American brothers and sisters and ancestors, and how they used the institution of the church, how they used faith, religion, and hope, and all of those things to advance. Because it's often stated that faith, religion, we need to get rid of those things. They won't advance us, but that's just not accurate to history. So being Black History Month, I want to highlight how we really got to a place of our freedoms now, how those things had to be fought for, died for, and what they were in the name of. So again, let me just say this for myself. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. That's my Lord and Savior. I am a pastor, been one for 15 years now. But this presentation, as I will state in it, is not to make you a believer of my faith, right? This presentation is not to make you a believer of the Bible. I want to be clear, because sometimes if we're not clear on what the presentation is about, we get lost, right, on what the message is. But this presentation is about how if we don't study the history right, we can allow white supremacy to distort Black history, and therefore we'll be hating on what our ancestors didn't hate on, but actually built, right? So I'm going to go through it. I'm going to tell you what this presentation is about. First, I want to show you some of the works that I'm going to be using. Let me say this, because for some reason it has gone, these narratives again get put in there, I guess, because of who I am. But no one has given me any information for my presentation. These are my studies and my studies alone, but all of this information is verifiable and everyone could go study. So I put the books on there. Also, I want you to know every book that I show on here, I actually have in my home. And if anybody wants to see that, I could just grab them right here or right here behind me and pull them up. So I'm going to be, a lot of my presentation is going to be based off the works of Carter G. right? We like PhDs, and these are the real scholars. These are our Black scholars, right? Dr. Retchel, he's another scholar historian. This is a great book. If you don't have it, you should pick this up. Dr. Hakeem Aki, going to be doing some information that he gave as a historian in Africa and the African diaspora, right? Craig Keener, it's another book. So I'm just right now, I'm just going through real quick because when I get to going in the presentation, I want to zip through it. So I want to show you now, these are the works that I'm doing. I got a lot of different slave narratives as sources, right? These books, again, are books that I'm going to just be using throughout our presentation. All of these who have wrote these books, they're PhDs, since we like those PhDs, scholars, historians, and those who've been studying this area much longer than I have. Dr. Yolanda Pierce. All right. Going here. I know this one. Gonna be doing this. All right. If you know, Raphael Warnock was just the first African-American senator elected from Georgia to the Senate. He has a great book that he wrote, some of those works too. Frederick Douglass and all of that, all right? So these are just some of the works, and I'm gonna be doing a little bit of my own book. Yes, I am a 5-time author, and this is my latest book right here that I published. Graduate of Illinois State. Just give people a little history about me: a husband, father, pastoring for 15 years of the church that my father founded in 1976. Community activist. I'm a member of one of the boards that I started, the African American Ministerial Alliance. Also, I'm a member in my own community of the PSCRB, which is a police review board that our city started just a couple years ago, taking online classes now in Dallas Theological Seminary School. Okay. These are just some, because I think with Black people, we have a tendency to have to prove a little more to gain respect of knowledge and community work. And I don't want to be a person that says the things I'm going to say today and then not show works, right? That I actually do the work outside of the platform within my own community. So these are just some of the awards that I've recently gotten from the NAACP, the Marilyn Kennedy Award, listed in our local magazine here in town. I just won the 20 for 20, that's 20 leadership, those who were under the age 40, I'm 39 years old, to be distinct leaders within our communities, put on police community forums and all of that. So I just want to show quickly some of the works that I do. Here's 1,000, and our church does. And again, all this is going to add up to the point of this conversation we're going to have. Our church, just in this month, we're big givers within our community. I grew up in this section of town. This is where our community center was, is now the Boys and Girls Club. And so many of our children, Black and brown boys and girls, go to this club. And so we donated 1,000 in January to them. We donated 500. This is just in the first week of January. Donated 500 to our Heartland Head Start. And then because of the pandemic, one of the two or three parents within our church started their own Head Start thing. And they only had about 3 or 4 kids, but we still wanted to donate to Hilltop Academy. This is just stuff that we do. You'll see the dates on here, June 19, 2020 of last year. And these, I crossed out the names because I don't want to put other people's names up here, but these are posts that they put up for last year when we had Juneteenth. We gave out over $5,000 to our community, to Black business owners and those who wanted to be entrepreneurs. We raised that money in like less than a month and gave out over $5,000. So I'm showing you stuff that the church work and the work that I do, so that you would know I'm not just talking about it, but I'm actually about it, right? That we actually do the work. On the 23rd, coming up February 23rd, we are delivering our financial. So we again, just not talking about Black History Month out of our mouths, just not talking about having a plan, but actually working a plan. And so we'll be giving $6,000 in just a couple of days to over 12 people who signed up. We had like 20 applicants, 25 applicants. We picked the 12 that we thought were best fitted to receive the grant, and we'll be giving out $6,000 to Black-owned businesses. Why? As you'll see in this presentation, this is church history, right? Or this is Black history. What the church does now is what the church did then. And I think it's going to be important for us to highlight the work that's being done, right? So that we don't have misplaced hate. All right, just to show that we, again, participate in the political realm. It's not just, oh, hey, clap your hands, worship, say hallelujah, leave. And no, don't just participate in the national election, but this is just a conversation with we have our mayor elections coming up in April. So we do the work across the board. We bring in all the candidates and present a platform to inform our people, not to tell our people how to vote, but to inform them. So this is one of the candidates who is up. All right, now I want to play this. I just want to show that we literally do the work, right? And how it's not just talk. And so when last year, when all the Black deaths were happening and all of those things, in one day, we put up a post in one day and said, we're going out in the streets, and we had almost 500 people to come out there. And we were glad for all of the white people that were there supporting us, but we told them, please, y'all get in the back and allow all the Blacks to come to the front, because as much as we want you part of our movement against racial injustice, we also want you to know we have to be the face of it. So this is just march that we did. We marched from our church to our Law and Justice Center. That'd be me right there with the mic and the green, black and green shirt. I'm gonna play a little bit of it just so y'all know how we roll, right? Just so y'all know, because like I said, we can have these narratives sometimes, and we want to put it in the right position so that you'll see we're actually living out our history.
Polluting, right? They said, we know you're gonna talk about the violence, right? We know you're gonna say something against that because you're a pastor. That's right. Well, if I'm a pastor, it's not trying to be honest. And before I say something about looting, before I say something about violence, I need everybody to tell everybody the truth. This didn't start with George Floyd. No, sir. This didn't start with Breonna Taylor. No, sir. You want to talk about violence? Yes, sir. Talk about the violence. From their land. Yes, sir. From their land. Talk about the violence of building America. Yes, sir. Of being beat on your back. Yes, sir. Talk about the violence of being hung from trees. Yes, sir.
Just a little work, right?
Talk about violence, beginning violence. I come to tell you that I don't condone looting. I don't condone violence on no man. But I tell you this, I will not condemn my people who have been condemned for too long. I will not do what the president of your United States did. I don't call them thugs. Right. I call them kings. I call them queens. And I remind them who they are. Right. But you're a black king. Right. Oh my God. You're black queen.
Yeah, so because we'll have some people, I already know I can't see the chat, but I can already imagine how people going crazy on me, because that's the narrative that some Black people want you to believe, because they're really proselytizing their own non-belief. So they'll hate on someone that just because they're Christian, because they're Black. And I think sometimes we have this misplaced hate because we don't know our history. And so the claims of you don't preach against action and justice, you don't preach against, right? I mean, I think it's very clear. We out at the Law and Justice Center, right now, speaking what we speak for our people and doing those things. But even more importantly than that, it wouldn't be good enough if I was just out there talking. So this is just one of the news articles from that joint that we did. And I would just ask you to pay close attention to the bottom of the article, where it makes a quote that I stated. But if you look under there, I want you to see what we do. The event ended with Bennett calling 2 Black-owned business owners and the spouse of a 3rd Black-owned business up to his impromptu stage. He announced he was awarding each of them with $500 to support their business, and he encouraged the crowd to patronize. So we gave them that on spot. So this is what we constantly are doing, not just talking it, not just walking it, but in the example of those who came before us. The church has to be that place. The Black church especially has to continue to be that institution that deals in all elements, not just spiritual elements, of the advancement of our people. And so again, changing the narrative, because any Black man or Black woman that hates on another Black man and Black woman because of their faith and belief, even though they're advancing their people, those are the people we need to watch, not the ones who through whatever means, because you can advance people, the Black race. You don't have to be a Christian, right? You can be one that doesn't even believe in God, as we're going to point out in this presentation. All right. So history I'm going to start getting into this. History in great detail informs us on the wisdom, intelligence, and creativeness and greatness of Africans, African Americans, or in general, what we may call the Black man. Sadly, the intelligence and greatness of our ancestors and modern Black heroes who claim the Christian faith have been criticized as foolish, stupid, crazy, lost, and sometimes worse for supposedly accepting the so-called white man's religion or the religion and faith that enslaved us. Some perpetrate that, sorry, let me move this out the way, Garfield. That the thought that faith and belief didn't help to advance our community and now pose it as something that is useless and wasteful. All right, so many are misinformed, possibly lack historical knowledge, or simply deny the truth that our enslaved ancestors found their victory, community, education, economics through the power of the church, the Bible, and Christian faith. So it is absolutely false to suggest that this was simply a matter of force, or it is simply false to suggest that they had no other choice. It is simply false to suggest they only held to such views as tools to aid in freedom. It is simply false and drastically disrespectful, in my opinion, to suggest that our great ancestors accepted the faith and Bible of our oppressor. These views do not wholly add up historically, and it will be my point to not just make those statements, but to show it, not from my voice, but from their voices and the sources that I showed before. And I should also make known, it's not, I have plenty of more sources at the very bottom of this presentation that I'm willing to share with anybody. No, this presentation is not. I want to be clear, because I already know how y'all gonna respect those who came before, because they didn't believe in Christianity, right? Who are on this platform before. I already know how I'm gonna get it. So let me make clear. No, this presentation is not to persuade anyone to become Christian. But let me also say, if you want to become, I'm fine with that as well. But my presentation is not to persuade anyone to become Christian or to make the Bible your book of faith. Every man and woman has the right to choose belief or no belief in whatever they choose. All right, let's be clear on that. But since it is Black History Month, let us highlight that history that informs us rather than divides us. At the minimum, we should show respect and honor to those who came before and to the church institution and faith that propelled us to where we are now, while themselves were in a worse condition. Quickly, I want to just go through a couple things before you even have European slave trade. As Black theologian and scholar and founder of Black theology, Dr. James Cone taught Christianity does not belong to the white man who used it for white supremacy. I want to play a little sound piece of one of my favorite sayings of him. I love when I hear this and hear how he says it.
How you gonna get a European white Jesus in Palestine? You can't get that. But with white theologians, you can get almost anything out of Jesus. So they had reinterpreted Jesus so he looked like them.
All right, so this is our scholar. This is our scholar telling us, right, that you can't get what they imposed on Jesus. You can't get that, and where the scriptures themselves actually say Jesus was born, right? And so he speaks to this narrative, and so we're going to attack that narrative of white supremacy so that we don't distort our own Black history and then begin to condemn all Black people who may lean to that faith, right? Christianity in its genesis was cultivated in North Africa centuries before Europe. Again, because I want to be clear in my position, I am not one, others may be. I am not one that says Africans invented Christianity. I am not one that says Africans wrote the Bible. I am not one that says Jesus was an African, but I will tell you where we clearly know is he was not a European with blue eyes, and he was not a pale face. That is clear. He was a man, a melanated man, all right? So we understand all those things. And we understand that Christianity was cultivated. I want to be clear on the language that I use today. Was cultivated in North Africa centuries before Europe. The Coptic Egyptian church or church in Alexandria was in the 1st century. Dr. Retchell tells us about Tertullian and other African thinkers in the 2nd century who responded negatively to any attempts to associate Christianity with Greek philosophy. Before there was ever a King James, excuse my misspelling, y'all, I went through this kind of fast, but before there was a King James, there was a King Azana, whether you upset at him for accepting Christianity or not, but before any enslavement, before he was not enslaved, he was not an arrow put to his head or a gun put to his head. And you can discuss the reasons why he accepted it. We just know as a free king, he accepted Christianity for the Exum Empire and announced that official religion as their province religion, right? It was in the 6th century that the Ethiopian branch translated the New Testament into the native Ge'ez language. The Ethiopian church had one of the earliest versions of the Bible. So before you get to a King James translation, you have Ethiopians that have translated, right? In the 13th century, the Zagwe or the Zagwa Ethiopians carved churches out of solid stone rock. This is in the 1200s, right? British scholar Ivy Pierce called these stone churches one of the greater historical cultural heritage of the Ethiopian people. These are what they look like. All right. This is before we was on a boat. This is before we were in chains. This is before any of those things took place. Right. Again, Dr. Retchell says Africans are mentioned throughout the Bible. The Hebrew Bible alone cites Ethiopia over 40 times and Egypt over 100 times. In contrast, there is no mention of European countries in the Old Testament. Indeed, the first Europeans of any international consequence, the Greeks, did not emerge into historical record until the time period covered by the Hebrew Bible was almost over. One will not find a single reference to England, Germany, or Spain in the Hebrew Bible. These are not my words, but they are words of our historians, people that look like us, right? Not that people that don't look like us can't be historians as well, and I will quote some of them, but I think for the presentation of that I am making, it's best to highlight a lot of our Black scholars who say what they say, right? The word Rome and its derivatives are mentioned only 20 times in the Bible, and not once in the Old Testament, the word Greece, and its derivatives are mentioned 26 times in the Bible and 4 times in the Old Testament. In comparison, Ethiopia more than 40 times, Canaanites more than 150 times, and more than 1,000 references to the Hamitic cities, countries, or people in scripture. All right, the slave Bible that Brother Reggie talked about a little while. Well, the slave Bible itself is the white supremacists of that time own admittance that the Bible is not their inspired book, as they did not feel comfortable delivering all the scriptures to African in fear that he would see freedom as opposed to their so-called inspired book for white supremacy. No true writer authors a book and then hides the pages. Right? I want to be clear so that we don't get lost in the message that I'm bringing. All of that information that I just gave about Christianity in Northern Africa and how the Bible speaks of more Africans and African cities and African lands than it does any type of European land, which a European slave master would never have conducted his Bible to have such a weight in an African land with African faces and African thought. And so little of himself, right? But I want to be clear, that information that I just gave was not, or that the above information was to show that as to the Bible, Christianity, and Jesus before European enslavement of Africans, these articles are already active throughout history, especially in the regions of North Africa. That is not deniable. That doesn't mean you have to join in the Christianity. It doesn't mean that. It just simply means you can't start with enslavement being the reasons why some Africans accepted Christianity. That's the only reason we want to show that. And we also want to show that it was there before, so that when it gets to Europe and when the slave owner becomes to West Africa and justifies a lot of things in the name of Christianity, you can't look at them as the genesis of it, but you have to look at them as the thieves of it, which our ancestors did. The Black church throughout history and now has been the most influential institution of the African in America. And again, we should not use that information to fight each other. But I think a lot of times people of non-belief and of non-faith, they have a jealous spirit. So when we start talking about the church and when we start talking about Christianity, they don't want nothing to do, because they don't want nothing to do with Christianity. They want to deny our history. You don't have to be a Christian. You don't even have to believe that Jesus existed for you to to acknowledge what our ancestors did when they believed it, right? So just to be honest about the historical information is one thing, to believe in it is another thing, and that has to be your choice in whether you want to do that. But false narratives are detrimental to this Black history. So you don't have to be of the faith or of the church to recognize one of the essential, or one of the most, or I would even suggest greatest essential institutions where your freedoms and mine were birthed from. Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, another one of our great historians, he says this: if some people that say, well, Pastor Bennett, I seen the work you do in your community. Good job, bro. But we don't believe nothing you're saying. We don't respect you as a scholar. You're not, well, but I hope that we will respect some of our historians, right? And what they said. The Negro Church, let me back up. Let me also say there is no way in the time that I'm allotted that I could speak to all of Christianity, all of the sides of it. But so this presentation is not the whole story as to how things develop, but it is that portion of the story that highlights the false narratives of white supremacy and how it has distorted our view of the Black church. Obviously, it would take days, weeks, and months for us to give the full narratives of what everyone has said. But W.E.B. Du Bois says the Negro church is the only social institution, y'all, only social. And again, yes, during that time, and that's why I'm trying to point to during that time, there are more institutions now, but during that time, we need to understand the history, look at things, right? The Negro church is the only social institution of the Negroes, which started in the African forest and survived slavery under the leadership of priests or medicine man. Afterward, of the Christian pastor, the church preserved in itself the remnants of African tribal life and became, after emancipation, the center of Negro social life, so that today the Negro population of the United States is virtually divided into church congregations, which are the real units of race life. So let's begin to check these narratives about how our thought process is on Christians and the church. All Christianity is not good. All Black churches, all churches, period, don't represent what W.E.B. Du Bois is talking about now. But as we do a scope of history, we have to acknowledge that the outlook that many in the community have on the church, even from a historical standpoint, is not how our historians talked about it and dealt with it, especially when you go back to those years after the First Great Awakening, when our ancestors really began to develop their own thought process of Christianity, as we're going to show, okay? Historian James Washington, another Black historian, says the Black church was a church with the soul of the nation. As I go through this presentation, I will only begin to ask you guys if you believe that that the community thinks the same way about the church, and Black people and Christians the same way our historians talked about them. Another great, Gayrod Wilmore, Black scholar and historian in African-American religion, who's, and hopefully as I'm showing this, and let me say this too, shout out, because again, I don't want no problem. Shout out to everybody who already gives out this information in this community, like the MBK. We talk about PhDs, and I don't know if Truth historian has a PhD. I don't know, but I don't care who has a PhD. There are not too many people that I have met, seen, or read that has history in their mind like Truth historian, right? There's not too many people that can, I don't even think he's a believer. I don't think he's a Christian, but there's not too many people that can tell you all sides of our coming out of slavery than Truth. So shout out to MBK. But for those who may not know of this information, I don't just want you to listen to the presentation. Hopefully you take down some of the names and go read their information for yourselves. Right? But he was also the first executive director of Commission on Religion and Race. He served in an all-Black unit in World War II, was a militant civil rights leader who supported also the Black Power movement and was the Black face of the Presbyterians that brought the fight for racial justice to predominantly white churches. He is famed for acknowledging, here is another historian, a PhD, scholar, whatever we like to talk about. Here is this one saying the independent Black church is the first Black freedom movement. So we need to start having a lot more respect for our church, even if you don't acknowledge or are not inclined to the faith itself. The truth of the church and Christianity through Black eyes. As I will show in this presentation, Wilmore is just one of many of our great hero scholars and historians that proclaim the church as the central institution for Black freedom. It is essential to understand the church was not given to the Black man. We got to cut that out. The church was not given to the Black man in the Americas. It was taken by the Black man. It was fought for and built in blood. The Bible was not given to us as a reading source. Quite the contrary. It was revealed in secrecy. Upon its revelation, it was clear that Africans were much too intelligent. We must give our Africans credit, right, for Christianity. And I'm going to show you why. Because our Africans were much too intelligent to fall for the trap of false representation of Christianity and church discrimination. Adam Clayton Powell Jr., powerful civil rights activist in Harlem, New York, Adam Clayton Powell Jr. in his autobiography, Adam by Adam, talked about how he shared with Malcolm X the fact that Christianity was not the white man's religion and the Ethiopians were committed Christians prior to Europeans. Here is the Abyssinian church in New York, all right? And here is why this building still today is a part of that heritage that came out of slavery and out of the 1800s. It's still standing. One of the things I give Black churches credit to, the institutions they built way back then through all that discrimination and slavery, still these churches be still standing after all these years. That shows the strength of the Black man, right? The Abyssinian Baptist Church is Ethiopia, right? They named it that because of their Ethiopian heritage, right? And this was a group of Ethiopians, woman and man. I need y'all to catch this, that started their church when coming to New York in 1808. They started the church after going to a white church would put them in a slave law. They refused to accept segregated seating. From there, the mission to start their own Baptist church, giving it the title of their homeland, produced the Abyssinian Baptist Church. In fact, as I'm going to show in this presentation, many of our Black churches got their start as a direct defiance to white supremacy and desire to be independent. So it's kind of crazy that we push this narrative that actually supports white supremacy, that Christianity is the white man's religion and that's your slave masters of, and they gave it, when in fact in history we record that our Black people actually rejected what they were offering them on the basis of Christianity. And many of the Black churches that we kind of have a negative look at got their start because our people were refusing to accept the discrimination they were facing in white churches, right? It was from him that Adam Clayton Powell Sr. became pastor, and while he was fully devoted to preaching the gospel and teaching the Bible, he was also a pastor of social change whose churches produced educational classes for nursing business. The church went on to establish great economic and educational feats in New York, and are still doing that today. The reason I show what I do in my own city, it was not to boast in the brag, but to show that we're continuing the heritage, as many other Black churches and Black pastors are continuing the heritage of not just being what many people think, a church that only preaches spiritual matters. That if you are a true church and represent the true heritage of our Africans who actually started from the invisible church to the Negro church to what we now call the modern Black church, then it has to carry on the other works for our community, right? And I think that's the big thing, why they presented an avenue of an institution, as we're going to see, of both Christians and what they deemed sinners, right? To be able to be participants, that even if you did not accept the faith, what in the world has pushed Black people to a narrative that we would hate on Black people, right? Who also push all these other avenues because of their faith. All right, don't let that spirit of jealousy enter in as it pertains to what Africans, because again, there were a bunch of people who, not in the name of Christianity, not in the name of Jesus, did great things for African Americans. And Christians, let me say on my end, have to be able to acknowledge that we absolutely have people that don't believe in our God, don't believe in a Jesus, that have absolutely advanced Black people. And we cannot hate just because they don't believe in what we believe on. But on the other end, we have to stop pushing white supremacy by giving Christianity to a white man who misused it, when obviously we have our ancestors who've seen that clearly and said we want no part of this. Yet we have narratives that say we are taking part of that. But let's just keep on looking at what they say. But just some fun facts. Here's this Abyssinian Baptist church in 1948. Just a fun fact. Church is full. This is the wedding of Nat King Cole. All right, so just some good fun facts we'll put in there every now and then, okay? The truth of the matter is when it comes to color, we can't make the mistake of making everything white or everything black. We certainly can't make the mistake that for the sake of our belief or non-belief, that we automatically conform to lies that support white supremacy. As it pertains to history and to the Bible, white supremacy has openly whitewashed events, writings, and people despite clear evidence of otherwise in order to uphold a level of status, right? There is a danger of black suppression when we grant those who suppress ownership of things that inherently aren't theirs to claim. Throughout this presentation, we will see many examples of the intelligence of our ancestors and their rejection, not of Christianity, but of white supremacy in the name of Christianity. It was through this rejection that blacks created what is known as the invisible institution, the Negro Church, and more modernly, the Black Church. These statements can best be seen with both Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey. So if you don't agree with what I'm saying, let me just use their language, or somebody you might deem one of our great ancestors. Let me use their exact language so you will understand it in the way I'm saying it. In the narrative of life of the American slave Frederick Douglass, right, in 1845, he actually at the end of his book had to go back because after reading it himself, looked at it and said, man, people are going to read this and think that I'm against religion. People are going to read this and think that I'm against Christianity because of how I banged on Christianity in the book. Yes, Frederick Douglass in this book attacks Christianity, but he wanted to come back and make it clear that I need you to understand what my position is. And I'm sure no one would deny or denounce Frederick Douglass as one that stood for his people, advanced his people. And I'm surely he would hope that no one would be suggestive that he took on his the faith of his oppressor. So he states it for himself. I love the pure, peaceable, and impartial Christianity of Christ. I therefore hate the corrupt, slave-holding, woman-whipping, cradle-plundering, partial, and hypocritical Christianity of this land. Indeed, I can see no reason but the most deceitful one for calling the religion of this land Christianity. I look upon it as the climax of all misnomers, the boldest of all frauds, and the grossest of all libels. So he is clearly pointing out what I am trying to assert through this presentation. I think he speaks it even much more eloquently than I could ever do. But what he's doing is presenting the narrative that as this black man, I don't give Christianity to the white man and say it's there. In fact, I reject their Christianity and say, as it pertains to how I see the biblical text, as I read the scripture, Christianity, as he also says, is the furthest thing from what the white man represents. But let's go further. Garvey, quote, on Christianity, same type. Now, again, remember, there are people with different stems of belief within the Christianity sect. So I'm not suggesting that Garvey thinks about Christianity in the same light. There's some theological disagreements that we may have. That's all right. But as to the point that Frederick Douglass made, as to the point that I'm making to show that our black people did not just conform to a system of Christianity that the white man placed on them. He says, I believe that God, and whether you believe in that God or not, again, we cannot say that Marcus Garvey didn't advance his people, but we must not put words in people's mouths. We must allow them to speak for themselves. I believe that God lives for me as for all men, and no condition you can impose on me by deceiving me about Christianity will cause me to doubt Jesus Christ and to doubt God. I shall never hold Christ responsible for the commercialization of Christianity by the heartless man who adopted as the easiest means of fooling and robbing other people out of their land and country. Okay, those are his words. Henry Turner, another great, like, it's amazing to me how we can see what our ancestors believe or how they at least thought about the Christianity of the white man, right? When, if you go back and just do a study, they were more militant about it than we are, right? So Henry Turner, a Christian preacher, politician, activist for African-American whites, was known for his public rebuke of white Christians. He did a lot for us in the political field. He advanced us in politics and all of those things. But he made it clear and was clearly bold to rebuke white people in front of white people who pushed that Jesus was a long-haired, blue-eyed white man. Right. And he's also famous. One of the famous quotes he has where he took out a Bible and then he put two guns on top of the Bible and said, my life depends on these two things, the word of God and these guns. All right. Examples of misplaced ownership. White supremacist and racist preachers would push the lies of the curse of Ham, thus being the curse on Africans, which has time and time over been proven as false and not true biblically, nor as scientific interpretation of race power. However, even Africans in slavery did not believe the lies. So why would we? And again, there may be some who did, but I'm talking about if we look at the overall majority of how we progress, it was because Africans absolutely did not embrace Christianity. And again, you don't have to take my presentation because people will try to pick a fight with me. I'm giving you a narrative within what I'm actually showing you. So pick a fight with Frederick, who obviously said, I don't agree with their Christianity. Pick a fight with Garvey, who said, I don't agree with their Christianity. Pick a fight with Henry Turner, who said, I don't agree with that. And those of us who are free men and free women should be very careful about placing our judgment and mindsets on those who were actually into slavery. Let's let them speak for themselves. Cornelius Garner, in his slave narrative, says that old white preacher just was telling us slaves to be good to our masters. We ain't cared about that stuff because we wanted to sing, pray, and serve God in our own way. Cornelius didn't say we didn't care about that stuff because we didn't believe it. We don't care nothing about that God. We don't care nothing. They just said we don't believe what they telling us because they ain't even telling us about God. As you're going to see multiple times what the slave narrative is saying, these that were actually in it, they say they don't even talk to us about God. They just tell us to be God, wants you to be good masters, but we didn't care about that stuff. We wanted to sing, pray, serve God in our own way. One does not, again, I'm going to keep speaking this narrative so that somebody doesn't try to throw you off and cause you to miss the message of what I'm saying. One does not have to be a Christian or believe in Jesus. Again, I would hope that you would. I do, and many of our ancestors do. But as to this presentation, I want to be clear. One does not have to be a Christian or believe in Jesus to acknowledge the honor that needs to be given to the institution that was in many ways the first place of hope for the Black community. For one to claim faith and spiritual hope can't lead to advancement is not historically informed, as it was the very means of faith that led to educational, economic, liberating freedom via the Black church. Claiborne Gatling, another slave narrative. I had this a little later, but I'll deal with it now too. In late 1800s, he was interviewed when he was 89. He says this: before freedom, we always went to white churches on Sunday with pastors, but they never mentioned God. They always told us to be good niggas and mind our misses and our masters. This is what they're telling us. So again, we're not going to allow the white supremacy of what we think, because we hate Christianity because of how they use it to distort how Blacks actually seen it at that time, and then why they infused and used it. Okay, Dr. Michael Oben, right? And this is just another little fun fact, right? So maybe some of you know this and maybe you don't, but many of you have heard the story of the girl that got the Gorilla Glue in her hair, right? Well, this is the Black man who, when other people could not come up with anything to do, she's been in a doctor hospital and they could not fix it. This is the man that when he heard about the story, he's one of the world's greatest, born in Ghana, Africans, plastic surgeon, right? Who's a CEO of a store, and he gives millions of dollars of free surgery away in Ghana, right? He created a chemical that saved the girl's hair. And now many of us was laughing at her or telling her crazy for what she did, but this Black man actually created the chemical needed to actually get the glue out and keep the hair, right? But I wanted to bring him out again, not to suggest that you have to be a Christian, but he's a Christian. And he states for himself that he does at his surgery, like many times I say, well, leave God out of this and leave God out of that. Well, actually, for Blacks, Christianity is built within our souls to where we don't leave God out of the works that we do. And I'm only pointing this out to suggest we got to stop the narrative that bringing our faith into our science, or bringing our faith into our surgery, or bringing our faith into our economics, or bringing our faith into would mean then that we lose some type of legitimacy or intelligence or ability because of that. He states for himself that before any surgery, he takes his faith in God in the room with him and prays before every procedure. Says his faith is directly responsible for the work he does. Not suggesting that you, if you don't pray or if you don't have faith, that you can't do great surgeries or whatever it is that you do. Only saying we have to stop the narrative, right? That makes us think another way. Carter G. Woodson, for me, one of the greatest historians in our community. Let's just read his information. since y'all may not agree with mine. The Negro church as a social force in the life of race is nothing new. Prior to emancipation, the church was the only institution which the Negro in a few places in the South and throughout the North was permitted to maintain for his own peculiar needs, offering the only avenue for expressional activity of the race. The reason I want to point out how Carter G says the only is not to suggest that there are none now, but what I want to express is, being that it was the only, as we're going to show, it wasn't given. Black institutions and Negro institutions wasn't just simply like, here guys, you guys are great slaves, here, go build up the Black church. There was resistance against us having our own independency. There was resistance. So the fact that they built these institutions, whether you agree with the foundation of the faith or not, is one thing, but to acknowledge that this was the first institution, even as historian Carter G. Woodson says, that actually helped us to gain our freedom. But then that was prior to emancipation, right? After the emancipation, here is what it says. Moreover, the Negro church developed a social atmosphere which somewhat strengthened its hold on the youth about to go astray. Not only education found its basis in the church, but fraternal. I know some people ain't gonna like this, y'all. So I already know they're giving it to me. Some people aren't gonna like it, but it's not me saying it. Your argument is not with me. Not only education found its basis in the church, but fraternal associations developed therefrom. Business enterprises accepted the church as an ally, and professional men to some extent often became dependent thereupon. Most movements among the Negroes, moreover, have owed their success to the leadership of Negroes prominent in the church. No better examples of this can be mentioned, and it goes on, but let's look down. Since the Civil War, the Negro church as a factor in general uplift has become what the oppressed Negro longed to make it prior to that conflict. In the first place, Negroes regularly attended church, whether Christians or sinners, right? So it wasn't just, you got to be a Christian to go here to receive of this education and so on and so forth. Let's continue. Attend to the church is the Sunday school. Attached to the church is the Sunday school. Many a Negro had in attending it learned clandestinely to read and write before the war. Now they, without fear of punishment, eagerly study in the churches on Sunday, learn the alphabet, the spelling of words with 1, 2, and 3 syllables, and finally to read the Bible. Finally to read the Bible. They wasn't reading the Bible like that before, right? All right, finally to read the Bible, that they might know for themselves the truth hitherto kept from their fathers, but now revealed to children in freedom. This is what Carter G. Woodson is saying, not me. So while many people would just want to give you the impression that the Bible was just given to Black folks and Black folks just read the Bible and believe what the white man said, it's just actually not true to history. You may have certain segments where you can point that out, but historically it's not true. Many of these Negroes often learn more on a single Sunday than the average student acquired in a day school during a week. In these Sunday schools, not a few Negroes laid the foundation for the more liberal education, which they thereafter obtained in the schools established by the religious and philanthropic friends of Negroes working in the South immediately after the Civil War. I'm just going to read the highlighted part. From the study of the Bible, the Negro developed, moreover, a desire for biblical literature. He heard the moral appeal and gladly accepted the message to those in quest of the higher life in Christ. All right, now I want to go back, I want to piggyback and deal with slavery in Africa just for a little bit, only to deal with how this presentation is going to go hereafter, right? So it should be understood that slavery did not just happen in Africa by accident. The Portuguese arrival to Africa was with purpose of obtaining wealth and power. Once the Portuguese became aware of West Africa's gold and natural resources, they did what they do. They looked to claim it as their own, all of Africa. It should also be understood that many African nations were already trading goods before the European arrival. No, they weren't convincing Africans to simply just trade Africans in exchange for Bibles. Europeans traded guns, powder, liquor, knives, beads, cloth in exchange for people. In the book A Way Out of No Way, Dr. Retchell says this: many members of the African ruling classes were implicated in international slavery. slave trading. A few African leaders resisted the temptation, but others sold their neighbors in exchange for guns, textiles, liquor, and other products. Several of the larger and better organized African societies, particularly among the Yoruba, the Dahomey, and the Ashanti, actively engaged in slave trading at the expense of their neighbors. Many of the African leaders were well aware of the great harm that the slavery caused. Let's go and see if someone else confirms that. Dr. Hakeem Adi, Africa was, these are all his quotes, okay? Africa was impoverished by its relationship with Europe, while the human and other resources that were taken from Africa contributed to capitalist development and wealth of Europe and other parts of the world. It was gold from the great empires of West Africa, Ghana, and Mali that provided the means for the economic takeoff of Europe in the 13th, 14th centuries and aroused in the interest of Europeans in West Africa. On the African side, the slave trade was generally to the business of rulers or wealthy and powerful merchants concerned with their own selfish or narrow interests rather than those of the continent. At that time, there was no concept of being Africa. Identity and loyalty was based on kinship or membership of a specific kingdom or society, right? However, by the mid-17th century, the European demand for captives, particularly for the sugar plantations in America, became so great that they could only be acquired through initiating raiding and warfare. There is no doubt that some societies preyed on others to obtain captives in exchange for European firearms, in the belief that it did not acquire firearms. If it did not acquire firearms in this way to protect themselves, they will be attacked and captured by their rivals and enemies who did possess such weapons. It is clear that without, again, this is all Dr. Hakeem's word. It is clear that without the weapons, forts, ships, and guns, resources, conquest, and colonization would not have been possible. However, it is also, this is mine, sorry. However, it is also cannot be denied, because I want to be fair, it cannot be denied that European slavery of the African in many cases was being justified and supported by European churches. Many Europeans misused the Bible, Christianity within slavery with the need to soften the spirit of the African and embolden the supremacy of the European. While it is without question that the European did not originate the Bible, it is undeniable that they manipulated it and used it as a power source of corruption in many ways. However, it also must be clear that the narrative that Christianity, a religion, or a Bible enslaved is false or not completely whole. Be it clear that the transatlantic slave trade would have never kidnapped, killed, and enslaved millions of Africans from their land if it was not for European military weapons, chains, gun, trickery, insurance company, banks, government, and some African slave traders. All I'm saying, and that's so people can be clear, is that there were so many other physical elements to slavery, like the kidnapping of slaves, military, war, guns, and trade that led to it. If you take those things away and just say, here's a Bible, go get in the boat with chains and strip away from your family, ain't no African letting that happen. All right. The truth is, if we do a full historical view, we find that many who enslaved with biblical justification did not truly give the African biblical Christianity. In fact, most slave owners did not even want slaves practicing Christianity. This is not about you becoming a Christian. It's about you seeing what our ancestors saw as it pertains to Christianity. In fact, most of the slave owners did not even want slaves practicing Christianity. History proves that the European didn't just shove the Bible in Africans' hand and tell them to become slaves, and Africans became Christians. Also, once the African could read the Bible or understood the truth of Christianity, they saw freedom, not bondage, in the name of Christ. In the slave narrative of Claiborne Gladney, that's what we talked about after he stated how he never went and talked about God. You clearly see him as a member for over 50 years in the AME church, right? Let me go. In fact, many slave owners didn't want their slaves learning to read the Bible or hearing about Christianity, as stated in the book, The History of the Negro Church by Carter G. Woodson. Here's his quote: many slave owners were worried about the conversion of the slave because there was fear they would, according to Christendom, become free. So that's the reason why they didn't want them to even know about Christianity, because there's a law, or even if it was the unwritten law, that if you're Christian, you can't be enslaved. Right. And why we're going to see how they began to create laws, right, to do that. Frederick Douglass explains in his narrative that his master stated, if the slave, here's what his master stated: if the slave learned to read, he would no longer be fit to be a slave, which he was actually true. Not that we were fit to be slaves before, but our education even pushed our level of advancement and desire for liberation. He also stated while he was a slave on the Sabbath, the slave owners would want black men fighting and boxing and drinking, etc. But he would sneak and do Sabbath school where Africans would come to learn God's will. Douglas claimed that if they were caught reading the Bible or here at the Sabbath school, they would be beat. Right? The narrative is always that the slave master gave us the Bible. The reality is most slaves had to sneak and read the Bible. And if they found out that they were reading the Bible, they was going to get beat up. Right? W.E.B. Du Bois, co-founder of the Atlantic Conference on Negro Problems at Atlanta University in the late 1800s. This conference was important. It was a social science project that he did. So those of us who like science, it was a social science project really that he did. The conference was important to the development in African-American education, especially the research looked into history of the African-American past and present of that time institution and ways in which the problems of education, economics, etc. could be solved in the African-American community. The Negro Church Report of Social Study in the 8th Conference. The facts is this deeply researched report shows that Europeans actually had to, in the 1600s, create laws that conversion to Christianity, baptism, or holy sacraments did not free the slave, because initially was the law or way of belief as to Christianity. Again, maybe that unwritten law that Christian view through scripture would not comply with the intentions of the slave trade plantation. And they knew that, so they made up laws like the 1667 law that states African baptism no longer would allow for liberation. It is clear from the citations that in the 17th century, not only was there little missionary effort to convert Negro slaves, but that there was, on the contrary, positive refusal to let slaves be converted, and that this refusal was one incentive to explicit statements of the doctrine of perpetual slavery for Negroes. In the 1800s South, here was what another law said: it shall not be lawful for any number of slaves, free, Negroes, mulattoes, mezzosos, even in the company with white persons, to meet together and assemble for the person of mental instruction or religious worship. I know we only push the narrative that you got this. The white man wouldn't even let black people get together to have religious worship, either before the rising of the sun or after the going down of the same. And all magistrates, sheriffs, militias, officers, and hereby vested with power for dispersing such assembly. We're gonna get you out of here, right? So again, the black Negro institution, the black institution, the invisible institution that black people started was as a threat of being disassembled, beat, abused, and many killed, right? To this, the Reverend C.C. Jones of Georgia adds, we cannot cry out against the papists for withholding the scriptures from the common people and the keeping them in the ignorance of the way of life. For we withhold the Bible from our servants and keep them in ignorance of it, while we will not use the means to have it read and explained to them. Again, blacks weren't simply handed churches, Bibles, and Christianity were led to African slaves, creating what is known as, which this led to Africans creating what we know as the invisible institution in hush harbors. Here they secretly held their worship service and in many ways integrated their traditional African worship and those things within the worship and prayers and all the things they had. Here again, I'm just read some of the slave narratives to let them speak for themselves, so it's not, you don't feel like Pastor Bennett is just making this up. All right, start with the quote. Us niggers never had a chance to go to Sunday school and church. The white folks feared for us to get any religion education. We quoting these people, right? The white folks on the next plantation will lick their slaves, meaning hit them or beat them, for trying to do like we did. No praying there and no singing. This testimony is corroborated by white visitors of the South like Fanny Kimball, whose journal speaks of planters being entirely inimical to slave worship, fearing Christianity's potential subversive impact. It is clear that they thought if these people really read the Bible and if they really know the Christianity, they're going to want to be free. So we can't give it to them like that. Right? For those who did hear the message, it was intentionally abused, and the slave and the African knew it. Again, that's why I'm trying to point out that our Africans were not intelligent. They understood what they were being told. So it says in this quote, when the white preacher come, he preach and pick up his Bible, and he claimed he get in the text right out from the good book, and he preach. The Lord say, don't you niggas steal chickens from your missus. Don't you steal your master's hog, right? That would be all they preach. All right. Former slave Mattie Curtis recalls that we ain't had no sociables, but we went to church on Sunday and they preached to us that we go to hell alive if we sass our white folks. Obviously, it's just saying stuff that you don't actually find in the text. Lucretia Alexander, another one, says this same old thing all the time. My father would have church in dwelling house and they had to whisper. Sometimes they would have church at his house. That would be when they wanted the real meeting with some real preaching. Clearly, all I'm doing again is pointing out that as for them, these are their words. They're telling you, we don't believe what they're saying. This is all they ever say. But we did go have our secret meetings. We did go have our belief where we wanted to hear what we actually believe, right? I'm just for time's sake, I'm gonna skip some of these. Again, this is just another slave narrative of it saying the same thing and pointing out, I would say at the bottom of it, where they say, and they cannot believe or trust in such a religion, meaning the slave did not believe and trust in what the white man was telling them. If you skip down maybe third or fourth, I want to pick this up where it says, and again, we're reading it in the way they were, speaking it. However, there was some niggas that wanted to learn so bad, they would slip out at night and meet. Why they have to slip out? I just want us to have the right narrative and push the narrative that they push. Slip out at night and meet in a deep gully war where they would study by the light of the light torches. But one thing show, they better not let no white folks find out about it. And if they was lucky enough to be able to keep it up till they learned the Bible, they kept it a close secret, right? It was a secret as they're reading the Bible. They weren't just giving the Bible countless time and time and over. They're telling you how they couldn't read. It was against the law to read in general. And it was definitely against the law to read the Bible because they didn't want them reading what they knew would cause them to want to be free. Former slave abolitionist William Brown states, the American Bible Society is sending Bibles all over the world. Wait, let me just back up and say this for clarity. Clearly, the white man did use the Bible to try to convert Africans. Nobody can argue that. And they used it as a justification for slavery. You'll never hear me not argue that. I think our historians and ancestors and slaves are proving that despite what they did, they were doing it through manipulation and not giving us the full text. And we were not hearing them. We were not believing them. And when we could read it for ourselves, that ain't what we took for it. That don't mean you got to believe in it, but we have to be honest, or we only support white supremacy. They didn't support white supremacy. That's why they would not believe in it, right? They took the text for themselves and said what it means to them. Right? If you have the mindset that, and you just accept what the white man said and not what your ancestors said, then to me, that is supporting white supremacy. The American Bible Society is sending Bibles all over the world for the purpose of converting the heathen. Its agents are to be found in almost every country and climate. Yet 3 million of slaves have never received a single Bible from the American Bible Society. A few years since, the American Anti-Slavery Society offered to the American Bible Society a donation of $5,000 if they would send Bible to slaves or make an effort to do it. And the American Bible Society refused even to attempt to send Bibles. These are not my quotes. These are quotes of people that lived in that time, all right? And again, I give the names, I give the quotes, look it up for yourself. The haters of the Bible and Christianity will always sell you a narrative of slaves coming off ships with Bibles being placed in their hands and Christianity being whipped into their mind. A circular view of history erases that lie and paints a more accurate picture told by the very slaves themselves, right? Here's another slave narrative. And I would rather listen to those who were actually in slavery than including myself who wasn't in slavery to begin to tell you what they thought. The well-known narrative account of former slave Charles Bell echoes this conclusion, contending that Christianity cannot be called the religion of these people. Talking about white people, right? Blacks were not dumb. Blacks were not dumb. And they tell us themselves that what the white man taught about Christianity was a lie according to their view of the Bible, and that it therefore could not be their religion. As soon as enslaved people learned to read English, they immediately began to read the Bible, and they immediately began to protest this idea of a biblical justification for slavery. right? Yolanda Pierce, PhD, Howard University, literally as soon as Black people took pen to paper, we were arguing for our own liberation. It is a historical fact that the book the European used for the oppression and justification of the oppression of the African American, the Black man used for its liberation. All right, let's just read this. Slaves and Bible Interpretation. This is from Dr. Keener. Black and white abolitionists understood the Bible correctly on slavery, but they were not alone. A few records of what the slaves believed show that slaves knew from the Bible stories that they did not hear that their preachers weren't telling them the whole story, and they reconstructed a more just version of Christianity on their own. As Cheryl Sanders, a womanist theologian and Howard Divinity School summarized her findings in her Harvard dissertation, conversion introduced the slave to a gospel of freedom, which contradicted the gospel of submission they were taught by whites. Some slaves were able to learn to read before Nat Turner's rebellion and discovered the truth directly from scripture itself. When my master's family were all gone away on the Sabbath, I used to go into the house, get down the great Bible. There I learned that it was contrary to the revealed will of God that one man should hold another slave. Again, these are slaves telling you how they view it much different from how they were hearing it from the white man. Again, this ain't to get you to believe in the Bible. You don't have to accept it if you don't want. That is not what this presentation is about. It is to honor our African ancestors for not doing what the narrative is, and that is accepting what white people said was Christianity. All right. The truth is the majority of history does not agree with those that say that book, the Bible, has been the worst thing that happened to Black people. In the 17th and 18th century, the African American actually viewed and used it as their spiritual and physical book of freedom. It is absolute fact that the Bible is what Blacks craved for literacy, education in that time, and spiritual revival. Ironically, the book that the Europeans used to justify slavery, Africans used to justify their freedom. Scholar James Cone, the father of Black theology, states, freedom is the gospel. Jesus is the liberator. There is no doubt, right, that millions of Blacks viewed the scriptures this way. Again, for Dr. Keener's book, slavery generally did not serve to promote Christianity. Through most of U.S. history, slaveholders did little to promote the evangelizing of Blacks. For the first century and a half of North American slavery, until religion gained a stronger hold in the Southern colonies, slaveholders saw to it that most slaves heard little about Christianity. During this period, the Black church was strongest among free Blacks in the North. The first American slaveholders did not want their slaves to hear the Bible because they feared that the slaves would understand that Christianity made them their masters equal before God. Slaveholders feared that Christianity would make their slaves not only proud, but ungovernable and even rebellious. All right, and then it says history shows that they turned out to be right, because when they read that, they went against that. All right, African slave insurrections motivated by Black preachers. Like we got this narrative, like the white man gave you and y'all just submitted to the white man. No, it was actually Black preachers who professed Christianity, not the white man's Christianity, that actually were leading insurrection. All right, just it goes on to talk about that, but just for the sake of time, I want to hurry through this. Now, okay, so Northern Black Christians issues called for emancipation. Like these Black people didn't receive Bibles and Christianity and be like, oh yeah, we supposed to be slaves. What we doing? No, Northern Black Christians issue calls for emancipation and noted that the Bible obligates Christians to oppose slavery. Like we'll just say, oh, they did it just because they want to be free. No, they used the text, especially in a time where a text was being used against them, to say this ain't what it says, this is what it said. It was in fact a fiercely committed Christian, David Walker, not Elijah Muhammad, over a century later, who in 1829 first called hypocritical white Christians devils. So when we think, oh, it's just Islam that no, a historical view will show you that Christians were saying the same thing. All right. Though he also praised the whites who had generally joined Blacks in the cause of freedom. Let's keep going. Y'all probably know the story of Equiano, so I'm a pass if you don't get his book and you can read it. But only thing I was pointing out here is he attacked as well people that use Christianity in the way that would be oppressive to Blacks, and he used it as an abolitionist to fight for his people. All right, let's go. All right, the greater majority of our Christian ancestors, abolitionists, vastly lived a different Christianity. Even in the political world, it was the black and white abolitionists and political figures that, with their Christian faith, Bible, and moral compass, fought for the emancipation and rights of Africans. We should be proud of this because this is Black history. It has nothing to do with whether you believe in the faith I believe in or not, or the faith they believe in, or even if you want to say the faith they came to believe in. You should be happy because this is Black history. These are Black giants standing up in worse times than we live in now, right? Standing up to this, saying we don't believe what you're saying. Absalom Jones, right? Congress enacted the act of abolishing of the slave trade in America in 1807, and it took effect in 1808. Absalom Jones preached the sermon commemorating this act before Congress in 1808. In the sermon, Jones preached from Exodus and gave a condemning of slavery speech and praise of God and a reminder of African heritage in his speech. I think it should be warranted that if we claim that the white supremacists of that time were using the Bible to justify slavery, we should be happy that we had strong Black men like Absalom Jones who would take those same texts in front of a Congress full of white people who had finally abolished the trading of slavery and use that same text to justify. He also stated this during that time: when our children shall ask in time to come, saying, what mean the lessons, the psalms, the prayers, and the praises in the worship of this day? Let us answer them by saying, the Lord, on the day of which this is the anniversary, abolished the trade which dragged your fathers from their native country and sold them as bondmen in America. Senator Charles Sumner, once a Democratic senator who became one of the founding members of the Republican Party, specifically to support anti-slavery and equal civil rights for Black Americans, gave such a passionate speech on the anti-slavery in the Senate that one of the Democrats beat him so bad it took him over 3 years. There's a reason why I'm pointing this out, that took him over 3 years to recover. And when he did, he came back even more against anti-slavery. He says, familiarity with that great story of redemption when God raised up the slave-born Moses to deliver his chosen people from bondage, and with the sublimer story where our Savior died a cruel death that all men without distinction of race might be saved, makes slavery impossible. There is no reason for renouncing Christianity or for surrendering to the false religion, nor do I doubt that Christianity will yet prevail over the earth as the waters cover the sea. Only reason I'm pointing this out and even pointing out white people now is because now we're going to go into the abolitionist movement, which is Blacks and whites standing up for the rights of African. Reverend Henry Garnett, former slave, abolitionist, educator, orator, first African-American to speak in the Capitol upon the 13th Amendment being passed to abolish slavery. Also one of the founders of the African Civilization Society, who for a good portion of his time was pushing for Blacks going back to Africa. He says these words: strong Black man, let slavery die. It has had a long and fair trial. Please don't ever get the idea or let the narrative of white supremacy push you that Black man and Black woman of that time who were Christians or believed in scriptures or believed in Jesus were soft, right? Let slavery die. It has had a long and fair trial. God himself has pleaded against it. Its death warrant is signed by God and man. Do not commute its sentence, give it no reprieve, but let it be executed, put to death with shame and horror. All right. Let's go on. The abolitionist movement are those who vehemently stood against slavery, mainly on the principle of religious views that God created all men equal. The abolitionist movement was one of the greatest movements in the fight against slavery that had great impact on freeing slaves. The reality is the majority of abolitionists were Christians. Not all, but the majority were Christians who, by their faith and biblical understanding, stood against slavery. All right. Again, many only with biased talk of the Christianity held by mainly whites that slavery was ordained by the Bible for the Black man to be slaves. Yes, in the 16th, 17th, 18th century, you clearly see a European-led effort in and out of the church to define slavery as of God of the Bible and in favor of African enslavement, mainly because many benefit as slave owners and capitalize off of white supremacy of that day. But when the full story is told, we see Quakers of the 16th century, Protestants, Baptists, and Methodists, both white and Black, who vehemently deny denounced slavery as criminal and sin according to God and his word. One of the greatest abolitionists, though a white man, was William Lloyd Garrison. African slavery is the embodiment of all criminality. He started the Popular Liberator newspaper that supported the immediate emancipation, that started the immediate emancipation, and that many of our Black abolitionists like Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, and Henry Garnett also took part in. All right. He says, abolitionists specialize in calling out the lie of biblical misrepresentation and using the truth of Christianity to call out those who enslave in the name of Christianity. And again, just because of time, I want to wrap up. Here are just some sources of those abolitionists during those times, right? Who gave statements vehemently denouncing slavery in the name of Christianity and causing or using the Christian text or the Christian faith as the absolute reason why slavery should not be. So we can't just tell one side of the argument and not acknowledge that it was faith. In many ways, if you go back and do a historical study of that time being very religious, it was the religious faith of abolitionists, both Black and white, that helped to advance us from a place of slavery. And then I have these sources here of where you can get these abolitionists. So just look them up, y'all. Minister Benjamin Lay, all of these, just a rebuke of it. All right. Thomas Doan, right? Another rebuke of slave owners calling themselves Christians and having slaves. And I'm just putting them up there. So if you want them, you can go back later and come back and pause it and get the sources for it. All right, George Boone, an abolitionist minister who called for immediate emancipation, that it is impossible for any person to practice human slavery an hour without violating the law of love, the golden rule, and the numerous other similar precepts that abound in the scriptures. All right, Frederick Douglass, back to him. That's my man. I love reading about Frederick Douglass. And one of his quotes that are the best was in the speech, what to the slave is the 4th of July. He speaks on how he welcomes atheism before the Christianity spoken by the deceivers. Obviously, he was a man of faith, but he posed a clear rejection to how white supremacy posed Christianity and said, I would rather not even believe and accept those who don't believe in God and don't believe in Christianity to accept that Christianity. The justification that Jesus, here's what he says, the justification that Jesus and the Bible condones the slavery of Africans is blasphemy. So we just can't have this narrative going around like our ancestors just picked it up and said, yeah, we do need to be slaves. And no, they were consistently in much harder times having to live up to the standard of standing up for our rights. All right. Now, again, the Black church is significant because it was the first and greatest institution that birthed our freedom and education. It is essential that the Black church was established by both a yearning for freedom and faith. No faith person like me can suggest that the Black church was only birthed because of faith. It was absolutely both for those contingents, freedom and faith, right? The Black church allowed the independence outside of white control that African Americans had never had in their community. Anyone who claims, this is my opinion, anyone who claims love for the African, the Black man, Black woman, for their people, but hate on the institution of the Black church. Now, you may hate things within the Black church, but to hate on the institution of the Black church as a whole cannot with any integrity claim to such above. You don't have to agree with the faith of the Black Christians, but the fact that the Black church, Black minister, and Black Christian societies at that very time deserve, at the very least, the respect of the Black community for trampling us and our community from our darkest hours and establishing hope and freedom. First African Baptist Church of Savannah, from the likes of David George, George Lau, and Andrew Bynum, 3 of the first Black pastors with the first Black church in America, not forgetting who they are, place African in the name of their church, right? Leaving the Baptist church or the churches that they began to start, they began to Springfield African Baptist Church. They began to put the words African, like we've seen with the Abyssinian Church, like we've seen with Richard Allen and the AME Church, like we've seen with the AME Zion Church. They put these things in their name because they did not forget who they were, right? They set the foundation for the institution of the African church, which W.E.B. Du Bois said, the greatest Negro institution in the world, as speaking to the Negro church, for African slaves setting a foundation in which blacks could succeed, the church was, and I proclaim still is, the greatest Negro institution in the world. At this 8th conference of W.E.B. Du Bois, the thesis or resolution says, the great engine of moral uplift is the Christian church. The Negro, again, these are not my words. If you have a problem with these, I have a problem with our historians who more than us looked into those times, right? The great engine of the moral uplift is the Christian church. The Negro church is a mighty social power today, but it needs cleansing, reviving, and inspiring. And once purged of its dross, it will become as it ought to be and is now, to some extent, the most powerful agency in the moral development and social reform of 9 million Americans of Negro blood. It was the National Baptist, I'm almost done, y'all. It was the National Baptist Convention, the African Methodist Episcopal, Colored Methodist, the AME Zion churches and denominations that were the engine to social reform, supported schools and universities, relief work to members and community, property, and newspaper. These churches and denominations held up the Black community throughout the North and the South in education, economics, socially, and vocationally. One may say we don't need religion, we need education. But the truth is, it was religious people who gave us our first centers of education. One may say I'm sorry, I messed this up, that we don't need religion, we need science, right? We need education. But it was religious people who taught us the practices of science and education. This, again, please don't get me wrong, is not me saying that only religious and educational people taught science or did economics or even do those things now. But as to the first institutions here in America after slavery, we must credit religious man and religious woman who had the mindset also to understand that in my religion, I must give education, I must give science, I must give medicine, I must do all of these things. We say we don't need religion, we need economics, but it was the church that developed the funds to give us our economics. Black Wall Street, O.W. Gurley. Black Wall Street wasn't just a man who started Black Wall Street, who bought 40 acres of land and sold only to Black people. He was also a man of faith, and his roots deeply tied into his faith, right? The founder of Black Wall Street was also Reverend O.W. Gurley, and also the pastor of now Vernon AME Church, right? And multiple churches was on that strip. So the concept and narrative that we push, right? As again, if you see me saying, I'm not saying that only religious people have made great institutions. I'm not saying that only religion, but I'm also saying we got to stop pushing the narrative that we got to get faith out, we got to get religions out, as if having faith in and religion in causes us to be unintelligent, when that obviously historically or modernly could not be true. I'm not suggesting that non-religious people can't produce education, science, or economics. That would be crazy for me to do such a thing. I'm simply acknowledging the fact that it is a false claim that our ancestors would laugh at if they could hear the words of the non-religious telling the religious their faith is holding them back. It was the man and woman of faith that consistently moved us forward. The great Fannie Lou Hamer, civil rights leader, secretary of the Student Negro Coalition, founding member of Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, ran for Congress, was attacked, was beat, was shot. She was a boss, just the way she talked. She was a G, respectfully, and never scared. After being beaten and by a white man who forced Black people to even beat her, as soon as she came out of the jail, she was still talking stuff in their face. But she also was a devout Christian who, for her, let them speak for themselves, who for her saw Jesus not as her white suppressors said, but as a revolutionary. And in her own words, her faith dictated her politics. Civil rights movement, the birth of the civil rights movement gains its ideology and physical muscle from the Black church. This is just history and preachers before that. It was the women such as Mrs. Jo Ann Robinson and Rosa Parks who were just as responsible for the kickoff of the civil rights movement as Martin Luther King Jr. Rosa Parks was just one of many Blacks who were suffering as a victim of racial busting system. Rosa's incident just happened to be the one that set off the Montgomery bus boycott. Rosa's faith, right? And helped her to have her fight. We can't take the faith away from our ancestors because they were Christians. They used their faith. So we don't tell Rosa, get rid of your faith, because Rosa told her it was her faith that told her to stay seated. Right? Rosa was a civil rights activist before the bus incident, a member of the NAACP, things that we may not know, giving love to our ancestors, and worked on the criminal justice side of as a sexual investigator. And one of the most segregated times in America, she stood her ground that in many ways led to the civil rights movement and the freedoms we have today in transportation. This devout Christian woman testifies of her own ability to stand as, I instantly felt God give me the strength to endure whatever would happen next. God peace flooded my soul and my fear melted away, right? It was that incident that mainly Christian leaders and Black churches, including Dr. King and Ralph Abernathy, galvanized the community of Montgomery and made for 381 days. They did the bus boycott, right? Which led to the 1956 Supreme Court ruling that Alabama's state and local laws requiring segregation on buses is unconstitutional. So when you're riding on the bus and you're signing on the trains and you're riding where you want to ride, you owe it to Black people. You absolutely owe it to Black people who stood. But you also have to acknowledge that the majority of these Black people didn't just, as the narrative goes, yeah, that's just because they were forced to do. No. Separate from what the white man and the white Christians were saying, stood on their faith and hope, because there was definitely faith and hope for 381 days that they had to walk to work, they had to carpool to work, that they had their faith that they were leaning on, right? But they also had plan and strategy and all of those things. The Black church and Black Christians became the leaders in the civil rights movement that went on to organize many movements alike to bring change throughout the South. However, it is commonly said they only use Christianity as a tool, right? That they didn't truly believe it. This is blatantly false, as history tells us. The Black Christian was deeply rooted in his faith and belief in biblical salvation and liberation. As we have seen historical testimonies of Carter G. Woodson, Equiano, Douglas Park, but also when we look at Andrew Bryan, right? George Loudon, all them. Well, Andrew Bryan, in one of his stories, was being beaten. He was being beaten at the point of death. And he rose up and basically told him, you're just going to have to beat me if you think I'm going to ever stop preaching about Jesus. You're going to have to kill me. So we can't say, oh, they was only did it. They didn't cop out when they was being beat. And if you read the story of him and understand what he went on to do for Black people, I'm only saying in our community, we have to be able to consciously accept what they accept, even if we don't accept it for ourselves, accept that they accept it and don't put words in their mouth and tell, no, they didn't really believe it. They absolutely had the faith that they had. They just didn't have it the same way that the white man had it at that time. The church then, according to Carter G. Woodson, the church then is no longer the voice of one man crying in the wilderness, but a spiritual organization at last, becoming alive to the needs of a people handicapped by social distinctions of which the race must gradually free itself. Funds are daily raised in Negro churches to fight. I know somebody's just gonna be mad at me. Y'all, I don't know why y'all would be mad at me. I ain't saying these things. This is just what the churches did. Funds are daily raised in Negro churches to fight segregation. An innocent Negro in danger of suffering injustice at the hands of the local oppressor may appeal with success to the communicants with whom he has frequent a common altar. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People would be unable to carry out its program without the aid of the Negro church. These are all from the white people of this country are not interested in the real mission of Christ, right? These are what our historians told us in these times about our people. In the Negro churches, moreover, as with Dr. J.C. Austin in Pittsburgh, they are being organized banks, housing corporations, insurance corporations, and even steamship projects in keeping with the idea. Let me clearly say, the narrative of white supremacy has to stop. That will make our people think all Black churches was doing, we're talking about either they were just pimping. Now, to be honest, to historical view, there were many churches, even back in that time, where pastors, because of just different reasons, they was drunks, they wasn't doing their churches no good, right? But if you take those little bitty narratives of people that can money, and dismiss the overall thing. That's not what our historians did. Our historians looked at how powerful these institutions were and tell us about what they did. Just don't focus on the ones that you don't think is good. Focus on the institution as a whole, because within all institutions, whether of belief or non-belief, you're going to have some great and some who misuse what the institution was ultimately set up for. And that has nothing to do with faith or non-faith. That just has to do with wicked people who misuse institution. General Sherman led a campaign against the Confederacy in the 1800s. As he swept through Atlanta freeing blacks, he would save black churches or black congregates who were for years fighting for their independence. Blacks wanted their own churches without the presence of whites control, specifically because of the oppression. Black church comes for a fight for independence. You don't have the black church because white people gave it to you. You have black churches now because the Negro church became the black church modernly, simply because we were trying to get away from that oppressive system that was happening in those times at the white church. General Sherman is directly responsible for the indecent success of churches in Atlanta, such as Zion Baptist, Big Bethel AME, Bethesda Baptist Church, Bethlehem Baptist Church. Big Bethel still standing as the oldest African-American church in Atlanta. This church, like many others, was invested in the education and economic strength of Black communities, right? Here is Big Bethel here, where they started the Gate City Color School, the first public school for African-Americans in Atlanta. Out of this church was birthed the Morris Brown College, birthed in the basement of the church. They created economics specifically for women. The boys called their mutual aid benevolence a forerunner for that type of benevolence in society. Many of the first HBCUs had their start with the Black church, such as the AME Wilberforce University. Morehouse University was started in the basement of Springfield Baptist Church, one of the most notable. Tuskegee University, you know, great. Y'all know Booker T. Washington, so I ain't go through this, who did great things, but he clearly says the man doing the vital things of life are those who read the Bible and are Christian. If you don't like the Bible, cool. If you don't like that faith, Christianity, cool. But as to the history, we can't push a narrative that is suggestive that those who did and that built for African Americans, they didn't really believe it. They didn't know. He says the man doing the vital things of life are those who read the Bible and are Christians and not ashamed to let the world know it. The other man that you will see on the screen is George Washington Carver, who was not only one of the greatest scientists ever in agriculture, but was also a teacher of the Bible, a teacher of the text, who taught all these things also at Tuskegee. Reconstruction withdrawal. During the period of Reconstruction, there was a massive withdrawal of Blacks from white church, but not Blacks from the church or the Christian faith. Blacks pulled together, purchased land, built churches, community, and public school, historically Black colleges. Now, as I close, I want to go to modern, because some people are like, man, yeah, that's all good and dandy. That's what the church was doing back then. What is the church doing now? And as Black people, we cannot be divided against the church. Let me say this, because if we're divided against the church, we're divided against our heritage and our ancestors. Let me also be clear on this. Christians and non-Christians should call out people that are not helping our communities, whether they are of faith communities or of non. If you are atheist and you have social groups that are bringing down our communities, we should call them out. If you're a Christian, and there are many, as a pastor, Christian pastors who are manipulating their people, who are taking the money of their people, buying jets, buying big cars. But we would be crazy as a people to let the minority blind us from the majority and the works that the churches are doing, which is predominantly, as it has always been, to help our people. Because some narratives will only teach you that our people, right, they only did it because this is a history that lives even to now. One of the greatest civil rights activists right now in our time. So I want to point out people that we should be knowing, the people that you could look into to see if I'm telling you the truth about them. Dr. Freddie Haynes, pastor and professor in Texas, one of the biggest voices and activists in our nation on social justice, developed the Thrive Intern and Leadership Program that began in the summer of 2014, employing nearly 100 young Black males between the ages of 16 and 19 yearly, receiving recognition from President Obama. The Thrive program also helps thousands with food, clothing, financial assistance, financial empowerment, free HIV and AIDS testing and support. During the pandemic, thousands of churches have stepped up to help not just their church, but their communities, especially the minority community. Churches in Atlanta went from helping 300 a week with food to helping thousands a week due to the shortage of food and food banks in the financial crisis. We've seen this all over the country, churches of our Black men and Black women, right, that have greatly participated in the education and testing for COVID. Here is a church in Chicago, may know Pastor John Hanna, who has since last year in 2020 given away to thousands of people free COVID-19 rapid testing, and doing that now even up until April 2021. They also at the same church give free legal advice and counseling, right? So I'm just pointing out some things that we do now. Pew Charitable Trust in Philadelphia based, and showing you how important the Black church is. Not to make you become a Christian if that's not what you want to be. Not to make you believe in Jesus if that's not what you want to do. Even though I suggest that would be best for you, as it's best for me. But it's your choice. But the point of this presentation is to show how our African ancestors and what they had to go through, the institutions that they started, how those institutions are still in play and working today. The Pew Charitable Trust and the Philadelphia-based public-private ventures, a national research and social policy organization, created a survey to measure the impact of faith-based organizations on their communities for the people that say Black churches ain't doing nothing now. And out of 401 congregants surveyed, 363 or 91% offered at least one social service program. The survey estimates that if all of these religious organizations were suddenly to eliminate their outreach programs, it would cost more than $200 million to replace the social and community services they provide. Alfred Street Baptist Church, another historical Black church, right? The now Alfred Street Baptist Church got its start in the 1800s during slavery, where the coloreds separated and formed their Colored Baptist Society. A rich history they purchased their own land after renting for 18 years, now called the Alfred Street Baptist Church. Here is what this church has done in 2019, giving you recent stuff, so we don't always just say, well, stuff that happened 20 years ago. In 2019, as is tradition, they blessed HBCU, Howard University, with $100,000 and then $50,000, I believe it was, to Spelman. This same church, right, last year in 2020 gave $1 million to Black social groups, right? Not just to Black churches, but to Black social groups. $1 million. This church, Tabernacle Baptist Church, donated thousands of dollars to the African-American businesses within their community. They raised over $5,600 and gave $1,400 to 40 different African-American owned businesses. I'm just saying, in Black History Month, we should actually push the narrative of Blacks helping to advance. We always, we should push the narrative that there are actually people out there with plans. Brother Garfield just told you about a plan he's coming up with. As far as I know, Brother Garfield is not a Christian and does not believe in Jesus. When I heard he was pushing a plan, I credit him for his advancement of Black people into our community. But it is only holding up white supremacy for us to then ignore that Black churches and Black Christians who believe in the Jesus that people tell us we crazy for believing in, and it's only harming our community, that most of them who say that, no shot, ain't doing as much as what I'm showing right now, or no shot even as much as I showed you that church does then. And that's not to say that you have to, but if you're going to talk against the church, then you got to be able to show and prove how you're doing just as much. If you're claiming that that institution is no longer needed, here's an institution that's doing just as much as that. And even then, we would still need the institution, because you can never have enough help for Black people. All right, this church in Birmingham, right? This church donated $100,000 to families in Birmingham, right? During the times of the pandemic. This church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, gave $65,000 worth of new shoes to the boys club and boys housing in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But not only that, gave $3.5 million to people within their church to pay off debt and all of those things, right? The books, here's another church, Lord Ministries, that gave $30,000 to a predominantly Black church, that gave $30,000 to a predominantly Black school that helped them with books and their STEM program, right? Here, also in Atlanta, one of Metro Atlanta's largest churches announces on Wednesday that, and this is in 2020, that it helped relieve a major burden from 1,200 South DeKalb County residents. New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Stonecrest said that through donations and a partnership with the nonprofit RIP medical debt. It had erased 1.3 million worth of medical. These things are only the continuations of blacks, right? These things are the continuations of what our ancestors started. Again, hopefully you understood, and I've said it enough. This has nothing to do with your stance of faith, but the narrative that pushes a white supremacy narrative of Christianity and black churches and what black people do should now, we not because of just me, but just because of history's sake, we should correct that narrative. Christianity and many manipulated even to this day. Black churches, many misuse their people even to today. But for the majority, we doing what our ancestors did. And for black history, that should be applauded. But when I say that, I say it as Garfield, not just for February. So I say to all those people of faith, don't put up your faith if your faith is pushing you to help your people. Don't put up your religion if your religion is helping you to advance and push your people. Don't put up your belief in God or Jesus or whatever it is because of a narrative of people who actually push up the side of the white man who claim Christianity as theirs and then told our black people that they must be slaves, when our black people, as shown in this presentation, clearly rejected that notion, looked at the same book and said, we see freedom. That's it, Garfield. I know I made some people mad, but I hope they got more invested in the information of what we did do.
Pastor Bennett, you're doing the work, brother. You're doing the work. They're gonna be mad. Let them be mad. You know what I'm saying? I always say, let them be mad if they want to do what they want to be mad. That's on them. That ain't on us. The information is here. Take it, review it, and then go from there and do what you got to do. All right. But ladies and gentlemen, I want to say, give a big round of applause to Pastor Bennett for putting some information out there that's needed for the community. So shout out to Pastor Bennett, man. I want to give you applaud for that. You had me here Googling stuff. You have me here fact check, like, I hope you ain't putting out crazy. Yo, listen, man, the brother is on point, man. He's on point. And the pseudo killers is coming on later, 5:30 today, ladies and gentlemen. They're going to respond to some of the stuff Pastor Bennett says. But hey, listen, family, there's nothing he says I disagree with.
And that would be crazy to try to debunk.
Yes, the church did influence people. And if we can't see that as a human being to another human being, I don't know what to tell you. Our hatred for the Bible has come to the point that we cannot say to ourselves, something good came out of the church. Garfield came out of the church. Isn't that good enough for y'all? I came out of Calvary Gospel Assembly in Jamaica, Sundown Crescent. I used to play Herod in church plays every Christmas time. I got baptized at 9 years old. Listen, man, the church influenced me as far as morals, as far as an upbringing, as far as rules I live by, and it did for all of us. Whatever, hey, spit out the bones, and what's that saying? Spit out the, whatever it is. You do what you got to do to make your life better. All right. I'm gonna say this to Pastor Bennett, and I don't know if you're gonna take this anyway, good or bad, but I'm gonna tell you right now, you are an example, bro, of a human being. You are an example. That's it. I don't have to say it as a Christian. I don't have to say it as a dude in Chicago. I don't have to say it as a Wycliffe lookalike, but you are an example of a human being, bro. And that's all that counts.
Yeah.
That's all that counts.
And
so I'm not doing no after show for this. I'm going to wait for the pseudo killers to come on and deal with some other stuff. I know they ain't got much to say to you. I'm going to turn them on and leave them on Zoom, let them do their crazy stuff. But and another thing too, no cursing. You can't curse on 20 for 20. All right? No cursing. So y'all got to get y'all vernacular right for tonight. And then, right? So ladies and gentlemen, this is number 15 tonight. The pseudo killers is number 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20, and 21. So all of them coming on, and it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be beautiful. My brother Unc about to drop some serious knowledge, and we're going to address a lot of different, well, not me, they are going to address a lot of things.
Hey,
all right, but peace and love. Pastor Bennett.
Hey, Garfield, let me say this.
Yeah, go ahead, brother.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. But let me say this too. I just want the community to check this out and to listen to this. If a black man or black people are going to do a response to my video or my presentation and didn't do a response to every other white man that came on this presentation, that's why I named it Misplaced Hate. You will want to attack my information, and again, it wouldn't be attacking me, it would be attacking the people that I quoted, pointing out what I pointed out. But if you didn't attack Bart Ehrman and do a video when he said Jesus existed, if you didn't attack the guy who laughed when they said Egypt is into Christianity and laughed when you pointed out, and Richard, he laughed like, why do these people have an obsession with being putting Egypt with Christianity? He laughed at that.
Yeah.
And if they didn't say, we coming to do a presentation on this, but you want to do a presentation on the black man who is helping to advance your people and clearly stated 1,000 times, you don't have to have that faith to advance yours. Just don't deny that people that did and our ancestors did use it. That's crazy. I need the people to think about that. That you so upset at a black man that you want to say, oh, we gonna dispel this information, and I'm the 16th person, and you ain't did one video yet, and I know you ain't agree with everything everybody said. That's crazy.
Hey, listen, I'm gonna close out there, man. I'm gonna say peace and love to everybody.
Appreciate everybody that that watched.
Go back and rewatch the show, and then do what y'all do. All right. I don't think the pseudo killers is coming to respond to you though. I don't think they're coming to do that.
No, I wasn't saying pseudo killers. My man, I wouldn't expect Aunt to do that. I'm saying anybody who would do that. If they didn't do that for the first 15, that's crazy. Yeah. I'm sorry, 14. But it's all good. I appreciate you, Garfield, and I appreciate everybody who gave their time to the presentation. I know it was long, so I appreciate everybody who took their time, and I certainly appreciate you, Garfield, for allowing me to be on the platform.
All right, definitely. Hey, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening. I'm having a little sound issue with Zoom. I don't know why. But peace and love to y'all, man. I'm out of here. I would have stayed longer, but I can't. I don't know what the feedback is all about, and I don't want to mess up the show. All right, ladies and gentlemen, 200 people watching. Listen, man, share the show, like the show. We got the pseudo killers coming on. I'm going to put the flyer out in like 10 minutes. Y'all blast it out. Give them guys some love, just like how y'all gave Pastor Bennett some love. Come back and give the pseudo killers some love. All right? Peace and love, family. We out of here. Thank you, Pastor Bennett. I really, really appreciate this. All right, peace and love.